Let's begin to take our seats, please. We're going to start in 2 minutes. Our first speaker, Don Hoffman, will be presenting remotely by a video he sent in. He's having health issues and could not be here. And as you know, he's very well known in this field for his interface theory, and it seems he's a psychologist who's also on the very close to Deepak's position, as we'll hear. And he sent this is his video of his talk. He's a professor at UC Irvine. And as you can see, the talk is titled Traces of Consciousness. Don Hoffman.
Has the same speed in all inertial frames. We can taste thousands of flavors, see millions of colors, smell trillions of odors, and experience countless sounds and bodily feelings. Most theories of consciousness assume that space-time and its objects are fundamental. Objects with the right causal or functional properties give rise to conscious experiences, or to the illusion of conscious experiences. There are trillions of specific experiences to explain. A causal or functional theory should pick one and explain it. For instance, the taste of mint. Integrated information theory would give a causal account, a Markov matrix. Or CoR would give a Hamiltonian and its collapse. So, how many experiences do causal and functional theories explain so far? 0. Ask each causal or functional theory of consciousness, what is your theory, specifically, for mint? This is the mint test. Some theories propose that consciousness is fundamental, along with conscious experiences, such as the taste of mint. So these theories don't need to pass the mint test, but they must pass a different test. If consciousness is fundamental, then it must somehow generate space-time and its objects. So these theories of consciousness should explain basic features of space-time, such as, why is the speed of light the same in all inertial frames? Why is there no preferred inertial frame? Physics assumes this. A theory that claims consciousness is fundamental should explain it. Moreover, it should explain the standard model of particle physics. So, how much of our space-time physics do these theories of consciousness explain? Nothing so far. Ask each theory that claims consciousness is fundamental, do you pass the space-time test? What is your new and mathematically precise contribution to our understanding of space-time and its objects? We propose that consciousness is fundamental. We model it as a vast network of conscious agents, much like a social network. Conscious agents are not in space-time. They create space-time. It is just a headset that they construct. To understand space-time, we must start with the observer. The observer cannot be an afterthought. It must be the starting point. We model observers using a theory of conscious agents. Each agent has the same structure. First, it has a repertoire of possible experiences, or qualia. Given its experience, an agent decides what action to take from its repertoire of actions. The agent then acts on the network of agents, which in turn changes what the agent perceives. Each agent has a counter that counts its experiences. We model this with Markov chains. The arrows are Markov matrices. A Markov chain with a counter is called an enhanced chain. Actions are important, but in this talk I focus just on the dynamics of experiences in the enhanced chain. But it leads to striking connections with physics. We enjoy many complex experiences, but for clarity, I focus on simple experiences. Consider an agent that has only 4 distinct experiences: red, green, blue, and orange. It experiences these colors one at a time in some random sequence. We describe this with a Markov matrix. For instance, its second row of numbers means if I see green now, then with probability 0.5 I will see red next, and so on. Now suppose we attend only to red and green. The matrix on 4 colors induces a dynamics of red and green. We describe it by a smaller matrix, whose entries are uniquely determined by the larger matrix. The smaller matrix is called a trace matrix of the larger. This notion of trace matrix should not be confused with the trace of a matrix, which is the sum of its diagonal terms. The trace of a matrix is just a number. The trace matrix is an entire matrix. For completeness, here is the formula for computing the trace of a matrix onto a subset A. For models of active inference, the trace chain minimizes surprise, measured as entropy rate. No other probabilistic model can do better than that. Tracing induces a partial order on Markov chains. Markov matrix M entails matrix N if M is a trace of N. We write M less than or equal to N. Markov chains form a non-Boolean logic under the trace order, including meets and joins. 2 Markov chains may join to form a larger chain. This has applications for active inference and artificial intelligence. For any Markov chain P, the traces of P form a Boolean sublogic of the trace logic. The trace logic itself is non-Boolean, but it contains Boolean logics. So classical reasoning emerges within a richer, non-classical framework. If P has n states, its Boolean sublogic has 2 to the n members, including P and the empty set. The rest of this talk is mostly about the surprising power of the trace logic. In particular, relativistic spacetime can be constructed from the trace logic, and much more. I will now show how. Consider again an agent that can see 4 colors, and consider its trace onto red and green. On the left, a counter increments when any color appears. On the right, a counter increments only when red or green appears. The counter on the right is slower. It sees fewer colors. This is time dilation. Time runs slower on a trace, so gaps between ticks are longer on a trace. Let delta t0 be the gap between ticks of the big chain, and let delta t be the gap between ticks of the trace chain. Then we can write delta t equals gamma delta t0, where gamma is at least 1. The trace also creates length contraction. The distance between states shrinks in a trace. This distance is determined by something called the commute time. The commute time between 2 states, A and B, is the expected number of steps from A to B and back. For instance, the commute time between the red and green states in this Markov chain is the expected number of steps from red to green and back to red. The first thing to note is that there are an infinite number of paths to consider. Red might go to green and then back to red for a travel time of 2. Or red might go to green, then to blue, then to green, then back to red for a travel time of 4. Or red might go to itself first a few times before going on to other colors. So we see that the commute time requires an infinite number of paths to compute. Remarkably, if a Markov chain has n states, we can embed these states into an n-dimensional Euclidean space, such that the squared distance between each pair of states is the commute time. Trace shrinks distance. In this matrix, the commute time between red and green is 5.7. So their distance is the square root of 5.7, which is 2.4. Now we look at the trace chain on red and green. We find that the commute time between red and green is now 3.5. So their distance is 1.9, which is less than 2.4. We see that taking a trace contracts the distance. If L0 is the distance between 2 states in the original chain, and L is their distance in the trace chain, then we have L equals L0 divided by gamma prime, where gamma prime is at least 1. When we take a trace, time dilates by a factor of gamma, with gamma at least 1. Length contracts by a factor of gamma prime, with gamma prime at least 1. When does gamma prime equal gamma? For most Markov matrices, they are not equal, but for two classes of Markov matrices, they are equal. The first is the uniform matrices, namely n by n matrices, whose entries are 1 over n. We won't explore these here. The second is the cyclic matrices. For example, the state goes from 1 to 2 to 3, all the way to n, and back to 1 in an endless cycle. We propose that they correspond to light, and we will use them to build an analog of Minkowski space. For a generically chosen Markov matrix, gamma prime does not equal gamma. We suspect that future work will show that these matrices project to curved spacetime. But for now, we will focus on n cycles. We have seen that the trace operation induces time dilation and spatial contraction. We therefore propose that each trace is an inertial frame. The set of states in the trace are the possible experiences of an observer. The tracing process is an observation. Therefore, moving from one chain to another via the trace operation corresponds to a relativistic boost. For n cycles, we can think of gamma as a generalized Lorentz factor, from which we extract a generalized velocity v. As usual, we take c, the speed of light, to be 1. Consider a 3 cycle on red, green, and blue. The commute time between any pair of states is 3, so the distance is the square root of 3. This is our inertial frame, so its Lorentz factor gamma is 1, and its velocity v is 0. Now trace onto 2 states, red and green, or green and blue, or blue and red. These are 2 cycles. For every 3 ticks of the 3 cycle, we only get 2 ticks of a 2 cycle. So gamma is 3 divided by 2, or 1.5. The velocity v is now about 3/4 the speed of light. Finally, we trace onto the single states, red, green, and blue. These are 1 cycles. For every 3 ticks of the 3 cycle, we only get 1 tick of a 1 cycle. Therefore, gamma is 3, and the velocity v is now about 94% of the speed of light. There is no greatest Markov matrix, no greatest element of the trace logic. This entails that there is no preferred inertial frame. Special relativity assumes this. The trace logic explains why this assumption is true. A key feature of spacetime is the relativity of simultaneity. 2 events that are simultaneous for one observer may not be for another. This can be explained by the trace logic. Consider this graphic representation of a Markov chain. The matrix representation is harder to understand, so we will stick with the graph. Let's start off in state 0. With probability 1/2, we go to state 5 or to state 1. Suppose we go to state 5. Then we cycle through the states 5, 8, 7, 6, 5, and so on. The commute time between any pair of states is 4. Now suppose instead that we go from state 0 to state 1. Then we cycle through the states 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, and so on. Once again, the commute time between any pair of states is 4. Now suppose that we choose a boosted inertial frame. That is the trace of this matrix on all of its states except state 8. Then this is the trace matrix. Now the commute time on the left is 3 instead of 4, but the commute time on the right is 4. By symmetry, the trace on all states except state 2 is this matrix. Now the commute time on the right is 3, but the commute time on the left is 4. This is the relativity of simultaneity. A trace can change the order of events. As I said before, we proposed to model light as the projection of n cycles, such as this n cycle p. The round-trip time between any 2 states of an n cycle is n. Consider, for instance, the round-trip time between states n and 1. Starting at n, it takes 1 step to get to 1. Then it takes another n minus 1 steps to get back to n. So the round trip takes n steps. If we pick any other pair of states, we get the same answer, n. So the average commute time over all pairs of states, call it A of p, is n. This is the minimum possible. No other kind of Markov chain moves between all pairs of states faster than this. Thus, n cycles are, in this sense, the fastest Markov chains. We can define the normalized speed of a Markov chain to be S of p equals n divided by A of p. This speed of Markov chains ranges from a minimum of 0 to a maximum of 1. The speed of any n cycle is 1. No other Markov chain has that speed. The trace of an n cycle on a subset of m states is an m cycle. Thus, in our model, the trace of light is again light. In the trace logic, the trace of a cycle is a cycle. All cycles have speed 1. We propose that cycles project to light. This entails that the speed of light is the same in all inertial frames. Special relativity assumes this. We explain why this assumption is true. If light is the projection of n cycles, what property of n cycles projects to the polarization of light? First, note that there are n-1 factorial distinct cycles of length n. We can define a natural circularity parameter mu on these cycles, which varies from -1 to 1. Here's the technical definition, but I'll just discuss it intuitively. The circularity parameter mu is +1 for the counterclockwise n cycle and -1 for the clockwise n cycle. These correspond to circular polarizations of light with helicities +1 and -1. Here's a 14 cycle with circularity parameter mu equal to 0.5. This is an example of elliptical polarization. Here's a 14 cycle with mu equal to 0. This is linear polarization. We model inertial frames as trace chains and a boost as a tracing process. Therefore, an acceleration is a sequence of traces that each differ by one state. An acceleration can also be thought of as a projection into spacetime of a path through the trace logic. What about mass? How does it arrive from Markov dynamics? We propose that mass is entropy rate. A cyclic matrix has 0 entropy rate. A matrix with many links has a high entropy rate. Here is the definition of entropy rate. It tells us to sum the entropy of each row of the matrix, weighted by its stationary measure. Entropy rate is central to information theory and its concepts of channels, coding, capacity, and distortion. If spacetime is a headset, perhaps black holes appear when the channel capacity of the headset is exceeded. Light is massless, so we must model it with matrices that have 0 entropy rate. We use cyclic matrices to model light. Cyclic matrices do have 0 entropy rate and the fastest speed. Any matrix with entropy rate greater than 0 is not cyclic and thus has a slower speed. For this reason, no object with positive mass travels at the speed of light. Here is a simple example of a massive particle. State 1 goes to state 2 with probability E, rather than 1. This makes the entropy rate of the matrix, and thus the corresponding mass, greater than 0. We have proposed a class of matrices to model photons. Now we must propose matrices that model the other bosons, leptons, and quarks of the standard model of particle physics. We have seen that the trace logic of Markov chains generates relativistic spacetime. Now we'll see that the asymptotic behavior of Markov chains connects with quantum theory. The state space of a Markov chain often looks like this. The pink region corresponds to transient states of the chain. Each disk corresponds to an absorbing set of states. Each absorbing set acts like a roach motel. Once you get in, you don't get out. Each absorbing set is carved into subsets like pieces of a pie. These are called the asymptotic sets. Suppose we start the chain at the state indicated by the red dot. Then the state of the chain will wander around in the transient states until it hits an absorbing set. Once it hits an absorbing set, it's stuck. It stays inside that absorbing set, and at each step of the chain, it goes to some state in the next asymptotic set. It keeps going from one asymptotic set to the next in a never-ending cycle. This asymptotic behavior of an enhanced Markov chain P is described by the harmonic functions of P. These are eigenfunctions G with eigenvalue 1. These harmonic functions can be written in the form G sub rho K as shown in this equation. The harmonic functions of enhanced Markov chains are identical in form to the quantum wave functions of free particles. This allows us to make physical interpretations of the asymptotic behavior of Markov chains. Suppose, for instance, that the state of the Markov chain is in absorbing set 1, which has 4 asymptotic sets. Then the Markov chain for these 4 asymptotic sets is a 4-cycle. It has 4 harmonic functions which correspond to 4 wave functions for free particles. The first has momentum h over 4, where h is Planck's constant. It has an energy of hc over 4. Similarly, one can compute the momenta and energies corresponding to the 3 other harmonic functions. So conscious agents with the trace logic may give us a non-local hidden variables theory of quantum phenomena. Markov matrices are the hidden variables. Their asymptotic behaviors are perceived as quantum phenomena. The hidden variables describe observing agents, and thus are measurement dependent. The trace logic on Markov chains gives us generalized Lorentz transformations. The harmonic functions of enhanced Markov chains may give us quantum wave functions. Together, they suggest a new approach to relativistic quantum theory. For instance, we can start with the enhanced Markov chain on 3 states, red, green, and blue, and compute its wave functions. Then we can take its trace chain on all these pairs of states, and for each pair, compute the new wave functions. Then we can take its trace on all single states, and for each one, compute the new wave functions. This means we can combine relativity and wave functions without requiring quantum fields. Quantum field theory is a powerful tool, but it has well-known problems. Notably, it fails at the Planck scale, roughly 10 to the minus 33 centimeters and 10 to the minus 43 seconds. Moreover, its sums over paths in spacetime can diverge. Sums over paths in ergodic Markov chains converge because probabilities sum to 1. We have seen how the Markov dynamics of conscious agents can appear as the mass, energy, and momentum of a particle. What about the distinction between bosons and fermions? Suppose we have an ergodic Markov chain P, and we create a 2-particle dynamics by tensoring P with another copy of P. And consider a swap operator S that exchanges the 2 copies of P and commutes with P. Then the space of harmonic functions of this tensor product kernel splits neatly into a symmetric bosonic sector and an antisymmetric fermionic sector. Each sector is individually invariant under the Markov evolution. If, for instance, you start with a bosonic harmonic function, it remains bosonic forever. This decomposition is mathematically identical to the way quantum states of identical particles split into symmetric and antisymmetric representations of the permutation group, where the symmetric representations correspond to integer spin, and the antisymmetric representations correspond to half integer spin. The swap operator swaps states, but it ignores the time counters of enhanced chains. To model spin more accurately, we propose to enhance the swap operator to act also on time, giving us an enhanced swap operator S tilde. Here I and J refer to states, and M and N refer to time counters. S tilde generates what's called a central extension of the swap. Its square is the joint time shift. In a continuum limit, as the time increment between steps goes to 0, one obtains a double cover of rotations, namely SU2, which covers SO3. Eigenmodes with S tilde equal +1 remain bosonic, those with S tilde equal -1 fermionic. We have proposed how the Markov dynamics of conscious agents can appear as the mass, energy, momentum, and spin of a particle. Can we model particle decay? Consider this Markov chain. Its entropy rate, and thus its mass, is positive. Now suppose that we choose a boosted inertial frame obtained by tracing this matrix on all of its states except states D and 0. Then we obtain these two Markov chains. Both chains have a determinant with magnitude 1. The chain on the left has helicity 1. The chain on the right has helicity -1. Both have mass 0. The initial chain is suggestive of the neutral pion, which has positive mass. The probability E is suggestive of the rate of decay of the neutral pion into two photons, with helicities +1 and -1. This matches the two chains we obtain in the trace. Here, just to illustrate the ideas, we used 4 cycles. We could use larger cycles, which correspond to greater energies of the photons. Similarly, this Markov chain is suggestive of the negative pion, pi-, with positive mass. The probability C is suggestive of a decay rate of a charged pion into a muon and a muon antineutrino. Similarly, this Markov chain is suggestive of the positive pion, pi+, with positive mass, which decays into a positive muon and a muon neutrino. These examples of particle decay are, of course, just suggestive. Much fun exploration lies ahead. We need a new approach to particle decay and particle scattering using the trace logic. Here are some ideas. If I see a sequence of states, such as these colors, then I can estimate the Markov matrix that generated it using maximum likelihood estimation. If I restrict attention to just the reds and greens, I can again estimate the trace matrix using maximum likelihood estimation. The longer the sequence, the better my maximum likelihood estimate of the matrix. A Markov matrix, P, can generate many sequences of states of varying lengths. For each sequence, we can estimate a matrix P, an estimate of P, a matrix that won't be necessarily P, but an estimate of the sequence from P. The set of all these estimates form a geometric object called the Markov hedron of P. We suspect that the Markov hedron of P will be central to a theory of particle scattering associated to P. Classical bits can be cloned at will. Quantum states cannot. The reason is that quantum operators are linear. Unitarity is not needed to prove this no-cloning theorem. Similarly, Markov matrices are linear operators. They cannot clone probability measures, which are the Markov states. Thus, Markov states, like quantum states, are private. If you want privacy of states to model privacy of qualia, then Markov states can do the job. To understand a Markov chain, I can study sequences of its states. For instance, to learn its entropy rate, I need a long sequence, so I can estimate the entire matrix and compute its entropy rate. To learn its current state, I need a short sequence of one state. We face a fundamental limit. Measuring global properties, such as the entropy rate, precludes measuring the state accurately. Measuring the state precludes knowing the global properties. This suggests an origin of the Heisenberg uncertainty principle. If two Markov matrices have a join in the trace logic, this join is a new matrix that entangles the two. The join does not entangle just one property of the matrices, such as their entropy rates, but all properties of the matrices. This may account for the phenomena of entanglement and steering in quantum mechanics. It may also account for interference. Consider, for instance, the double-slit experiment of quantum theory. It can be modeled by this Markov chain. We start at state 1 and fire a photon. The photon arrives at the double slit, which has 2 slits open. Taking a trace on all states except 7 through 10 models 1 slit open. Taking a trace on all states except 11 through 14 models the other slit open. The chain for 2 slits open is the join of the chains for 1 slit open. The join has a richer set of harmonic functions, which create the novel interference patterns when both slits are open. What is next for the theory of conscious agents? We need to identify the Markov matrices and their traces that give us the physical projection, that is, the projection to space-time and its elementary particles. We need to find the Markov matrices for each elementary particle of the standard model of particle physics. We already have the matrices for the photon. Then we need to explain the amplitudes for particle scattering. And we need to show how curved spacetime emerges from the trace logic, and we need to develop a trace logic theory of active inference. In summary, we propose a theory beyond spacetime. What theories of spacetime assume, our theory explains, including why the speed of light is the same in all inertial frames and why there is no preferred inertial frame. Spacetime is just a headset, not fundamental reality. We offer a Markov theory of conscious agents beyond spacetime. It should allow us to reverse engineer that headset. Brains do not create consciousness. Brains do not even exist when they are not perceived. Brains are merely icons in our headset. They are the headset's depiction of how the headset is engineered, nothing more. Most of reality is beyond our space-time headset. That's why most of reality is dark to theories that start with space-time. Many thanks to my collaborators, and especially to Chetan Prakash and Swapon Chattopadhyay. Thanks also to Jeff Lieberman for helpful comments on this talk. Any mistakes are mine.
Thank you, Don. We're very sorry you can't be here nor take questions. His theory is very formidable and has been out for a while, and we respect it. And with that, we'll hope to see him next time at the next conference. But in the meantime, we'll move on to our second speaker, who almost needs no introduction. Deepak Chopra was ranked a few years ago as the third most influential spiritual leader in the world behind the Pope and the Dalai Lama. And I don't know if those rankings still hold, but in any case, it's a great pleasure to introduce him, who I'm proud to count as one of my friends. I think he's probably got about 10 million friends, but I'm still proud of that. And without further ado, and the title of his talk is What is Fundamental Reality? Round of applause for Deepak Chopra.
Thank you. Thank you, Stuart. Thanks, Stuart. Thank you very much. And I should just start by saying I'm very privileged to be on the same platform as Don Hoffman and Federico, who is following me. I think it's a very appropriate setting. If you didn't understand what Don is saying, then go to my YouTube channel, Chopra Well, and you'll see 20 conversations that I had with Don to explain what he's saying in mathematical terms. So you'll find those 20 conversations on YouTube, and they're just dialogues between me and Don, and they are the basis of our next book, which is called Beyond the Matrix: How Conscious Agents Create the Human Universe. So the book is not out yet. Don has done his work. I have still to do my part, but it's all on YouTube right now. So let me ask you a question before we start. So far, have you enjoyed the conference? Thank you, Stuart. Thank you. That's a very enthusiastic response. Now let's try an experiment. I'm going to ask you the same question, but please do not answer it, and don't mess this experiment up, please. There's always someone who messes it up. So I'm going to ask you the same question, and your answer is yes, but don't answer it till I raise my hand. Is that clear? Have you found the conference interesting? So my question is a mental event. Your answer is a mental event. Agreed? In between is you, consciousness. It's as simple as that. Okay? Between every perception, between every thought, between every emotion, between everything you imagine, is a discontinuity. And it is of the nature of space. So let me ask you the same question. Don't answer it. Just slip into it. Have you found this conference interesting? And what you experience is a presence. It's not a thought. It's not an image. It's not a feeling. It's nothing you can describe. But it's here. Where is it? Here. And when is it? Now. So, this presence that you feel, I hope you felt it, this awareness is obviously not in space-time, as he was saying. It's not in space-time. It gives us the experience of space-time. Also, it is not causal. Okay? It actually creates the framework of space-time and causality. So I'm going to start my talk with a few axioms. Axiom number one, whatever fundamental reality is, it is neither conceptual nor perceptual. So if it is perceptual or conceptual, it's not fundamental. Whatever that fundamental reality, it cannot be conceived or perceived by any system of thought. Not science, not philosophy, not religion. You cannot conceive it or perceive it because it is without cause. You have to start somewhere. So we start with fundamental reality being of the nature of awareness or consciousness and being without cause, which is, I believe, the next talk, irreducible. So whatever fundamental reality is, it is acausal, without cause. It is the source of all perceptions and concepts. Furthermore, it is without form, because if it had form, you'd be able to see it, perceive it, conceptualize it. So it is without form. Being without form, it has no borders. And if it has no borders, then it's infinite. And it is also spaceless. It is timeless. It is irreducible. And in a way, it is incomprehensible. The only way you can comprehend is mathematically, right? And mathematics includes lots of zeros and lots of infinities. So as a metaphor, I offer you a new mathematical formula. And of course, mathematicians won't like this because it's not part of mathematical formalism. So the formula is 0 is equal to infinity is equal to 1. So right now, if you go on the internet and type out the following question: what are the 125 open questions in science? And the first open question is, what is the universe made of? And the shortest answer to that, because we have, even though time is a concept, I have, so many minutes. according to human constructs. But whatever fundamental reality is, right now, the questions on the internet, two most fundamental questions, there are about 125 questions that are called open questions in science. And the first open question in science is, what is the universe made of? And the shortest answer is made of nothing. And the second question in science today is, what's the biological basis of consciousness? And I'll share with you why these questions are unanswerable. Why these questions are unanswerable? Because they're the wrong questions. Okay, they're the wrong. As long as you ask ourselves the wrong questions, we will never have the answer. The universe is made of nothing. As you know, 70% is dark energy. We have no idea what it is. 27% is dark matter. We, again, don't have any idea. They are constructs for things that we cannot explain. So the visible universe is atomic universe is actually not even 3% of what the universe is. 3% of the universe is atomic. Of that, 99.999% is invisible interstellar dust that you cannot see. It's probably hydrogen and helium, according to everybody's current thinking. The visible universe, which is 2 trillion galaxies, 700 sextillion stars, and uncountable trillions of planets, and according to the latest estimates, probably 60 billion habitable planets just in the Milky Way galaxy. Habitable. You've been hearing all these talks about extraterrestrials and all that. That's 60 billion habitable planets based on our understanding of biospheres. If a planet is too close to its sun, too hot, too far, too cold, no life as we know it, but also things like gravitation and electromagnetic and gravitational ratios. The visible universe, which is atomic, is 0.01%. 2 trillion galaxies, 700 sextillion stars, uncountable trillions of planets is 0.01 atomic. But as you know, with atoms, we have this problem. They have this dual behavior. They're atoms or particles when you perceive them, but when you don't perceive them, we are told they evolve into waves. And these waves are waves of probability. They're not like sound waves or ocean waves. They're waves of probability in mathematical imagination. I'll repeat that. Waves that exist, that explain the universe, are in mathematical imagination. We call it Hilbert space. So what's the universe made of? It's made of nothing. Nothing that we can perceive or conceive. The second dead problem is the hard problem of consciousness, which is a non-problem. But the hard problem simply says, if it's made of nothing, then why does it look like this? Right now you're looking at me, what's going to your eyes is invisible photons. What's going from your optic nerves to your brain is something you can't experience, an action potential. And what's happening in your brain is electrochemistry. And you're not experiencing any of that. You're experiencing this. You're experiencing this. You're experiencing your thoughts, your emotions. None of this can be explained by current science. No experience can be explained by current science. So we've had lots of discussions on out-of-body experiences, near-death experiences, after-death experiences. I think the fundamental problem is the in-body experience. You cannot explain your in-body experience right now. you think that there's someone inside you, probably, maybe a homunculus, somewhere here, looking out at the world through these eyes. But there's no little Deepak here, looking at the world through these eyes. And as Don said, even the brain is an experience in consciousness. How do you know there's a brain? Well, you've seen it on a CAT scan or a PET scan. And actually you haven't even seen the brain except on a dissection table, as I have, as a medical doctor. But you cannot conceive of a brain until you experience it. So very simple experiment right now. If I asked you, what is this? You would say it's an object, right? And it's made of stuff. Of course, we know from all that we are hearing that even this is proportionately as void as intergalactic space. If I could actually see this with quantum eyes, I'd see a huge emptiness with a few scattered dots and spots and some random electrical discharges. That's probably closer to truth, because even those random spots and dots and random electrical discharges are made of empty space. So what's this made of? Empty space. What is the nature of this space? What is it made of? Well, you get to the irreducible ground of all-knowing. You start with space. You start with time. But as you heard from Don, even that is a perceptual and cognitive construct in consciousness. So how do I know this experience? Instead of calling this an object, or instead of calling this a hand, or instead of calling these fake glasses, instead of replace the word object with the word experience. So then we are getting somewhere. If I replace the word object with the word experience, how am I experiencing this? I'm experiencing this as a form, as a color, as a shape. The word podium or the word hand is a human description of this form, which is a shape, which is a color. I'm also experiencing it as a sensation. I could experience it as a sound. I could experience it as a taste, a smell. So what is this? It's a combination. It's a multimodal qualia experience in consciousness. And then the theoretical framework to describe that multimodal experience in consciousness is atoms, particles, force fields, gravity, etc. Those are human constructs. They're not fundamental. And that's what Don Hoffman was saying. Space-time, matter, energy, information are not fundamental. They are how we conceptualize a multimodal qualia experience, which is basically a combination of sensations. And in this case, a combination of human sensations. What does this look like to a dragonfly with 30,000 lenses? What does this experience feel like to a snake that navigates infrared? How about a bat that experiences this as the echo of ultrasound? What about a chameleon whose eyeballs swivel on two different axes? You can't even remotely imagine what this looks like to a chameleon or any biological apparatus that has stereoscopic vision. So what I call the objective world is a human construct for human experience, period. And human experience is the fluctuations of qualia in a field of consciousness which is without form and without irreducible, but it knows itself through the generation of qualia, which we then quantify as quanta. But if you go deep within this idea that I'm sharing with you, then even quanta, which are, superposition of particles, we say, but even quanta are qualia, because they're subtle qualia on the screen of consciousness. So quantum mechanics is actually qualia mechanics. And qualia mechanics follows the same rules as quantum mechanics. If I ask you, what's your next thought? You don't know. Uncertainty principle. Where is the thought before it emerged? It was in a superposition of thoughts. See, all the principles we know, non-locality, uncertainty, tunneling, and superposition of particles actually apply to superpositions of qualities of experience, which are species specific. Okay, so the superposition is not of particles, it's the superposition of qualia, of infinite possibilities of experience in a field which generates experiences that are species specific. So what are species? What Don Hoffman was saying. Species are conscious agents of a non-local consciousness in the matrix of conscious agents. So my book with Don Hoffman is exactly called that. Beyond the matrix of conscious agents that appears as what we call the physical universe. So now, in the interest of time, I will share one slide because I felt I should share at least one slide. Everybody has slides except Rupert Sheldrake, who's the smartest man in this room as far as I'm concerned. But this is the challenge to modern science right now. The hard problem of consciousness remains unresolved due to flawed assumptions in reductionist materialist science. Consciousness is not composed of parts and cannot be understood by subdividing or analyzing any physical system. Consciousness is indivisible and lacks granularity. Schrödinger said multiplying or dividing consciousness is meaningless. And actually, Schrödinger in his book, What is Life, 1947, 48, I forget, he clearly says that my equation, Schrödinger's equation, which is the most important equation in science as far as I know, says my equation is a mathematical description of Atman. Atman is non-local consciousness, and Brahman is universal consciousness. Schrödinger clearly states, my equation is a mathematical description of the self of the individual, which is also the self of the universe. So when we understand this, it is obvious that consciousness cannot emerge from matter. Atoms, molecules don't learn to think. In fact, atoms and molecules do not exist. Atoms, molecules, force fields, gravity are first experiences before you can mathematically describe them. They're modes of knowing and experience in consciousness. So consciousness should be considered its own ontological primitive. And there are limits to mathematics too. Conscious experience cannot be captured by mathematical models because consciousness defies. It says, I think it says deifies here, but whatever. Consciousness, you know that mathematics is incomplete. Gödel's theorem. There are theorems that you cannot explain, but they happen to be true. So what we call quantum physics reveals that reality responds to the observer. You do a particle-like experiment, you get a particle-like experience. You do a wave-like experiment, you get a wave-like experience. Is it a wave? Is it a particle? Well, it's both before you do the experiment and how you do the experiment. Perception is what we call matter. Matter is a label for species-specific perceptual experience. What we call matter is a construct. And if you begin with matter, you can never end with consciousness. But if you begin with consciousness, you can explain matter as a human construct for human perceptual activity, which is happening in consciousness. So there are only three ontological choices. Matter first, physical reality as fundamental, the reductionist view. Mind first, which is, of course, leading to consciousness as foundational, which is idealism. But I am neither an idealist, nor a panpsychist, nor somebody that you would call a physicalist, because these are all models. Consciousness cannot be modeled. Consciousness is all. It's a unified monism where consciousness gives rise to both the experience we call matter and the experience of mind. And as far as I'm concerned, only the third view, consciousness is all, provides a consistent and complete explanation. Consciousness transforms into experience of mind and matter, but remains itself. And the best metaphor I can give you is consciousness is the screen on which experience occurs. And nowadays we have access to infinite programs on the screen. You have Netflix, and you have CNN, and you have Fox, and you have all these. The programs are infinite, but the screen is one. And in fact, in the metaphor that I'm sharing with you, the screen itself is modifying itself into qualia. And so the qualia are the appearances on the screen, but the screen is the intangible, unimaginable, incomprehensible, irreducible, spaceless, timeless background, which is the non-changing factor in every changing experience. Therefore, the heart problem dissolves when consciousness is seen as the ground of being, and we have to abandon this mystique of materialism. We have to relinquish it for a true paradigm shift. And that paradigm shift is what Don Hoffman was speaking about. You and I are conscious agents projecting perceptual activity. Your body is a perceptual activity. How do you know your body exists? In the same way you know this exists. How do you know your thoughts exist? In the same way as anything formless appears as form and phenomena. So in conclusion, everything we call matter is a form. Everything we call form is a phenomenon. And everything we call phenomenon is a fluctuation of consciousness in the form of sensations, images, feelings, and thoughts. The qualia matrix, which is a multimodal species-specific qualia. And behind that is pure consciousness, which is without concept, without perception, a field of superposition of infinite possibilities, following all the rules that we have in quantum mechanics. Thank you.
Thank you, Deepak. Questions, right?
If you want.
Thank you, Deepak, for a very inspirational talk. I totally agree with you. I'm an idealist, so that's not a problem. But I want to know how you solve the so-called boundary problem. In other words, how do we get all these 500 or so individual somewhat separated, dissociated consciousnesses if we're all part of one consciousness? So how do we get all these Atmans out of the Brahman? Thank you.
The boundaries are perceptual and conceptual. Anybody who knows quantum physics will say that boundaries don't exist. John Wheeler, the boundary of a boundary is boundless. Think about that. That was his most famous statement. So boundaries are part of our conceptual and perceptual capacities in that which is inconceivable and imperceivable and without cause.
Do you think Atman from Brahman could be collapse of the wave function?
Yes.
Doesn't that give you a boundary, though?
It does give a boundary, but that boundary is conceptual and perceptual.
Thank you, Deepak, for the wonderful talk. I just want to understand from your side that you are talking about the fluctuations in consciousness. Why does the fluctuations happen?
So this is, in the chapter 1 of the Yoga Sutras of Patanjali, which I'm sure by our accent I can tell you you're familiar with. So Patanjali says that these are called vrittis. Vrittis means fluctuations, and they are a fundamental activity of consciousness wanting to experience itself as that. So right now, you're experiencing me, right? What you call Deepak. But that experience is happening in the same consciousness as the experience that you call you, right? So this subject and this object are entangled as vrittis in consciousness. And if consciousness is fundamental, it knows itself through these fluctuations.
So you mean to say that the desire to experience is also a very fundamental thing that is out there in consciousness, and we have to take account of that.
All experiences in consciousness, where else could it be? There's no experience in your brain. I can cut a knife through your brain, you don't even feel pain. Okay? There is no experience in the brain. The only experience in brain you can have is the neural correlates, which in turn is an experience in consciousness.
Hello, Deepak, Mr. Chopra. Thank you so much for an amazing, inspiring talk. And I wanted to share with you about the work of Augusto Santina Sabatini. He's a doctor in physics and quantum physics, maybe you know him. And his work from Asia is amazing because his correlation with the Tao and everything that you have explained is like everything is coming together. Like one of our colleagues were asking, when are we all merging? And I do think that all these Eastern philosophies on the ancestral knowledge and wisdom from our people are getting together, and it's very beautiful to see. So I think there is a lot of hope, even though, with AI and everything, maybe we lose hope sometimes. But thank you for that, and I would love to see your vision on the Tao.
Absolutely. No, the Tao, as you know, the famous saying in the Tao is the Tao that cannot be explained is not the Tao. So you cannot explain the Tao other than it's the source of explanations. Best metaphor, two monks are looking at a flag waving in the wind. You've heard this? One monk says, the wind is moving. The other one says, the flag is moving. And when they go to the Zen master, he says, no, neither the flag is moving, nor is the wind moving. Consciousness is fluctuating.
Thank you, Deepak. My question is, both Don Hoffman and you say that conscious agents are the ontological building block of reality. But isn't consciousness as its core just experience, not agency? Agency seems more like an evolved function of biological system that uses consciousness as a guide. So why do we treat agency as fundamental rather than derived?
So there's a difference between consciousness and conscious experience. And in the terminology I'm using, consciousness is not experience. It is the source of experience. It is what Stewart calls proto-consciousness. So consciousness is the source of all experience. And there's no biological basis of consciousness because biology is an experience in consciousness. How do you know you have a biology? You experience it, right?
Yeah, but I understand that matter comes through us only through experience.
Matter is just a human construct for human multimodal qualia experiences. Yes, sir.
Hi. Question here. Hello.
Where is he?
Hi.
Okay.
Yeah. I largely agree with your view and also Don Hoffman's. But how do you explain a situation of the brain stimulation caused qualia?
Very good question.
If you stimulate, particular area of the brain,
and you get an
that,
experience.
You get the color qualia or face qualia or motion qualia.
Yeah, absolutely right. So you can stimulate a part of the brain and reproduce the experience. The brain and its neural correlates are symbolic representations of consciousness. You can get the same experience by reading a book. Okay, if I give you a nice book with lots of interesting stories, what you're seeing is squiggles. Okay? Just squiggles. And yet you have an experience. So the symbol of reality can reproduce the experience of reality. Just like looking at a stop sign at the traffic light, and you know you have to stop. You see the green, you move. So the symbol of reality, even though it's not reality, it can reproduce the experience of reality through a memory, and that is a learned memory. And Rupert yesterday expressed very elegantly that memory is part of the matrix of consciousness. It's not in the brain. So let me ask you a question. What did you eat for dinner last night?
The finger food.
Huh?
Finger food.
What was that?
Like avocado. Something.
Okay, now as I'm asking you the question, can you visualize that experience?
Yes.
Avocado?
Yes.
Can you feel the taste?
I can remember, yes.
So where was that memory before I asked you the question?
There was nothing. Until I
that
tried to
memory
remember.
was in the matrix of the superposition of possibilities of experience.
Yeah, that's fine.
And then as soon as I asked you the question, you retrieved it.
Right.
Okay, so where do we go after we die? All these things are being asked these days. It's where that avocado was before I asked you the question.
But I wanted to ask you a question about the relationship between the brain activity which is possible to cause qualia, and if you stop that, then you also banish this qualia. In that case, I think that's a kind of a very strong, tight causal relationship between the brain activity to qualia.
Okay, so let me ask you a question. You're watching a program on television, right? And I destroy the television set. Does the program disappear?
If you stop, for example, interfere with the brain again with the stimulation, then you can also override that stimulation.
The fault of the instrument is not a reflection on the user of the instrument.
But that can be also overwritten by the brain stimulation.
Because the brain is the interface through which you experience what you call reality.
It's much closer to the qualia in terms of the causal changes.
Well, maybe, but the brain is not the only place where you have neurons. You have neurons in your gut, you have neurons in your heart.
Understand.
So this whole body is the interface for the non-local to appear as local.
Right, but that kind of stops at this bottleneck chain where this brain stimulation. Because if you interfere that particular area of the brain, then you lose the color, and if you stimulate that, you get the color.
It's a pattern recognition. This is the basis of AI too.
I don't think so.
Is AI conscious, or is it recognizing patterns of human interpretation of experience? You said I disagree with you, right? Is your brain disagreeing with me, or are you disagreeing with me?
Well, thank you very much for your talk, and I'm happy to see you here. I'm just wondering, by the way, I am Mustafa Erol from Turkey. I'm a physicist, quantum physicist. I'm just wondering your view, Deepak Chopra. before you existed in the world, your birth. What do you think about the consciousness before your birth? Will you be existing or you were not existing as physical matter? What about your consciousness when you say consciousness is the fundamental?
Okay, I got the question.
Fundamental, what do you think about the birth? You were not appearing in the world at all in 1920s, and you will not appear in the world in 220s.
Okay, so let me answer that.
2010.
Let me answer.
Let him answer.
Whatever.
Let me answer your
100
question.
years later.
Okay,
Whatever.
let me answer
So
your
what's your
question.
opinion on that?
Okay,
Thank you.
let me answer. First of all, if you really understand what I said, there's no Deepak Chopra. Okay, that's a name given to this experience. There's no Deepak Chopra. And what is Deepak Chopra as you experience it? It's not a noun. It started as a fertilized egg. And then it was a zygote, an embryo, baby, a toddler, and hopefully a mature young man, and then a mature old man, all the way to dusty death. So if you say, I am this body or this mind, tell me which one, the zygote, the embryo, the fertilized egg. So this is a multimodal qualia experience in non-local consciousness. Where did I exist before this? In the qualia experience of my parents as love, period. And then it created another qualia experience, which we decided, my mother decided, to call it Deepak.
What about 1,000 years ago?
Huh?
1,000 years ago.
Superposition of infinite possibilities. As the superposition of infinite possibilities of experience in the same way as particles don't exist until they are observed.
Particles do exist, that's right. But
The only
Okay.
way I exist is formless. Everything that I call existence is formlessness, knowing itself as form and phenomena. And that's basically even quantum reality. You know, quantum fields can't be experienced other than, say, Brown-Casimir effect, which is inferential. Quantum fields are theoretical constructs that give rise to electromagnetic fields and space-time and all of that. And of course, we don't understand gravity in those equations.
Didn't you tell me that the Upanishads say that consciousness existed before life, and
Yes.
then
Yes.
developed life as a vehicle to
Yes,
have
life
fun?
is the way consciousness expresses itself.
Okay. One more question. Who's got
Okay,
the mic?
so I'm a child psychiatrist, and I was listening to your child and adult, and I listened to your first part of your talk and the rest of it. But in the beginning, you were kind of summarizing all these different qualities, right? All these different, and then you said that behind that there's this formless form. Why do you have to add another layer? We know the experience of these other qualia. We know the experience of
The only
making
reason
a
you add
choice.
another
Why
layer,
do you need to postulate something else?
because you add the other real, because you say, where are these qualia coming from?
Well,
Right?
But
What is the source of the qualia? And are qualia fundamentally human, or they could be non-human qualia?
Well, I think it's irrelevant. I mean, if we experience it, then it's our qualia, and it doesn't have to come from somewhere, right? I mean, we come from somewhere, so why do we have to have this other layer of experience?
Because we're trying to give a cause to everything we experience, but the fundamental reality, you have to start from there. What is the ontological primitive of the universe? Is the ontological primitive of the universe matter? Is it mind? Or is it the field of infinite possibilities?
Well,
Isn't that the basic
the
question?
field of
The
infinite
basic
possibilities.
question is in philosophy, and I don't pretend to be a philosopher or a scientist, I'm just an explorer, but there are two things: ontology, what is the primitive from where everything starts, and then there's something called epistemology. What are the modes of knowing and experience, and what are the limitations of the modes of knowing and experience, given that our modes of knowing and experience are mediated by a human brain that evolved, well, only, say, 200,000 years ago.
But that's all we can apprehend.
That's all we can apprehend. That's why reality is incomprehensible. I said that. Without the incomprehensible, there's nothing that is comprehensible. Without the unimaginable, there is nothing that can be imagined. The unimaginable assumes form through imagination. That which cannot be thought of, silence or sound, begins in silence, which you can't imagine. So sound is the fluctuation of silence. Form is the fluctuation of qualia that we call seeing. If I ask you, where is this experience happening? You can't point here. It's happening here. This is the space. Now, in Eastern wisdom traditions, there are three kinds of space. This is physical space, where we are, which is unbounded, physical space. It's also called perceptual space. But in the perceptual space, we experience limitation, which is the human field of perception. The space is unbounded. Then there's a second space, mental space. Think of snow-clad mountains now. Think of a rainbow. Where does that experience happen? That's in mental space. So mental space, physical space, and then infinite space, which is borderless and spaceless, is the ontological primitive of the universe.
But you asked earlier, what if I had just blankness? So I can have an experience of blankness. I can have an experience of black. I can have an experience of being, shut out.
Okay, so now who's that I? You just used the word I. Who's that I, and where is that I?
It's within me, and it's
within
it's
you.
What
is the within you? Where are you experiencing yourself right now?
Where do I experience myself?
Yeah.
Within myself. Where do you experience yourself?
In the self. Now, where is the self? It's not in space-time.
Why? We're all in space-time. We're all in space-time.
I'll defer to you. I disagree with you, but I'll defer to you because this is an endless argument.
I'll defer to you as well.
You see, what we call the self of the individual is also the self of the universe. There's no difference between the self of the individual that experiences the body, mind, and universe, and the self of the universe that experiences the mind, body, and universe.
Yes, but that's not the same thing as saying,
So another big round of applause.
Thank you, sir. Set this.
All right, let's bring our next speaker up. He is none other than Federico Faggin, who invented the microprocessor and then went on to tackle consciousness and thinks that it's a field and irreducible. Federico Faggin.
It's a real pleasure to be here with you to share not my knowledge, but my life journey that created whatever knowledge I will express today. So when I was 4, I decided that I cannot understand human beings. I cannot understand the kids. They are mean. They do bad things, and but I can understand machines. I can understand machines. they are obedient. I can tell how they work. And so my father was a philosopher, but he didn't know that I made that decision that I wanted to understand. But I had to start with machines because they are understandable. They are made of parts. And the parts work together and they create a whole. I didn't realize then that the whole is just the sum of the parts in a machine. And it took a long time to find out that the whole that we are is not made of parts. In other words, we are made of parts whole. And now if you're not confused, in other words, we are parts whole of one. We are parts whole of all that exists. And therefore, if we want to explain how reality works, we cannot start from the parts. We have to start from the whole. And that's one of the fundamental problems that we have today with science with the lower s, not with the capital S. Science with small, the small science that believes to know everything. I call it scientism. Scientism is trying to explain the universe starting with parts that are separate, that they interact with each other. How can you get the whole if you start by breaking up the whole that is unbreakable, and then you try to put together the machine that you call universe? This is what scientism, which is another word for materialism, reductionism, is trying to do today. So my journey of bringing you a theory, a proposed theory of consciousness, which needs to be proven, in fact, needs to be falsified, like any theory should, because it's scientific theory, is actually the journey of my life, because much of what I learned was through my own experiencing life, experiencing the universe, and discovering that we have capacities for knowing that go way beyond what we have been told. They go way beyond what we have been told, because we have been told that we are machines. We have been told that, when the machine breaks, it can only be fixed from the outside in. We have been told that what we feel, especially if we are interested in understanding machine, we study science, we study physics, we study engineering. We start by saying, oh, don't believe intuition. It deceives you. Rationality, reason is only the way to go. And if you believe that 100%, you disconnect yourself from your interiority, the stuff that you have within, the capacity to know by experiencing what you know. That is what consciousness does. Consciousness is a property that we all have, which allows us to know from within. But if there is no within, then we forget about consciousness. We don't even know that it exists. And that's the first part of my life. The first 50 years of my life were lived first in, learning Catholic religion. I was born in Italy in 1941, so clearly, wartime. Another problem of, misunderstanding of consciousness, wars. But, I grew up in that environment, and I went to a technical high school to the chagrin of my father, who was teaching philosophy, history of philosophy, translated the Enneads of Plotinus in Italian, and wrote about Schopenhauer and Meister Eckhart. It was really trying to understand mysticism, these other dimensions that we have, and I couldn't care less. I can tell you, I could not care less. I wanted to first build model planes, and then, after I was done with monoplanes, build computers and, but build them better. So I developed a technology that would allow to build it better. And you can put the entire computer into a piece of silicon. Then I developed the first microprocessor because, if you don't do that and you don't do the memories, you cannot, how else can you put a computer? And on and on and on. And I started companies. Wow, my first company when I was 32, because Intel was not moving fast enough. I mean, I always follow my inner demon or my inner energy, what gave me passion, joy, excitement. But in that process, slowly, I lost myself. But being an entrepreneur, I actually learned something very, very important. I learned that whatever happens in my life, I somehow caused everything, not the totality of it, of course, but I was a major cause of what happened in my life. Because I was CEO of those companies, so if the company doesn't go well, whose fault is it? It had to be mine, in one way or another. So I had to accept that responsibility. That was the hardest thing to do. That was the first step toward understanding who I am, taking responsibility for my life. If you don't take that step, if you continuously blame others for your problems, you will never find what you are, because you disempower yourself by blaming others. So, so that was a major, major, major learning that came out handy later. What happened later was that, after my first company, where I messed up a few things, and so that's when I learned how to be responsible. And the funny thing of that responsibility was that it's not what I did the problem. It's what I did not do when I should have acted. I should have done something about it. That was my major problem. And somehow I grew up thinking that only if you do a bad action, you are responsible. I actually learned that it was not acting when I was supposed to act, when somebody was making a bad action. And not acting by killing him, but acting by, man to man. I did not have the courage to do that. And I also find out that there was a reason for that it took me a long time to find out. That by not acting, I was giving the other cheek, and so I was more than the guy that was hurting me. You see how we trick ourselves in order to feel superior to even do the most stupid thing that you can do. Okay? So time went by, and after my second company, I started feeling unhappy. I didn't know. I was suffering. Psychological suffering. I was very healthy. Everything was going fine with my life. In fact, I had checked all the boxes that if you check them, you should be happy. But I was not happy. And it was on my third company when I was trying to make neural networks back in '86, so almost 40 years ago. I started a company where I realized that neural networks were the way to do artificial intelligence against the better judgment of the expert in artificial intelligence, who said that neural networks will never work. And so after 5 years, I proved that they were the actual solution to those problems. But never mind that. But in doing that, I was studying neuroscience. I was studying biology, and one day, studying biology, I was reading about, how the taste works. Then you explain, the molecules of the food, the melt in the mouth, and they go into the cells that determine the shape, and then the electrical signals go to the brain. The brain does an analysis of the composition of the molecules, and then we say this is potato. But I say, but I don't see the electrical signals. Where are the electrical signals? There are no electrical signals. In my experience, I experience the food as the taste of the food. So where is the taste of the food coming from? That was probably 87. And, it dawned on me that I have never thought about what consciousness is. Up to that point, for me, consciousness was a word that didn't mean anything. Did not mean anything. I didn't study philosophy. I was making chips, okay? So that was my intent. That was my energy. So, but then I said, wait a second. I realized that there must be something that transforms electrical signals into sensations and feelings. And I couldn't find it. I was trying to build a robot that would actually be conscious. I tried thinking, how would I do that? There is nothing in physics that tells you how to convert electrical signals or biochemical signals, any kind of signals, into sensations and feelings, what later were called qualia. I discovered on my own what was called the hard problem of consciousness. But that's not the issue. The issue is that I also recognized that I was not happy, and that for years I have been pretending to be happy because I had to, in other words, my belief in scientism, because I was a priest of scientism at that time, clearly believing that we are machines and everything can be explained by science and blah, blah, blah. That belief was actually, wrong, because I should be happy. And that was a problem of consciousness. I realized that was a problem of consciousness. And it was an inner problem of consciousness. I didn't know why, but now I said, because I became responsible, remember, I decided that whatever happens to me, I cause somehow. Then I said to myself, with the logical coherence of science, well, then I must have caused myself to feel very, very unhappy. How did I do that? Why did I do that? And it was then that I felt like doing this on a table and say, I want to understand consciousness. I want to understand what is consciousness. And then I got an experience. And that experience came unexplainable, out of the blue. I could not have imagined that I could have that experience if I, even if I wanted to. And it was a night at Tahoe. I was on a vacation with the family, skiing, so the only vacation that I took in those days, 1990. And one night I woke up. I was thirsty around midnight, went to get a glass of water, went back to bed. And as I was just trying to go back to sleep, from my chest, a beam of white scintillating light comes out of my chest. But it is physical. It is not an idea. It's physical energy. White scintillating light is love. But love so powerful that I never experienced anything like that in life. I thought that I knew what love was. Not a chance. That was, besides, how can love come out of me? Somehow love must come from the world, from my wife, it was a childish belief about love that I had. But once I experienced this thing, which was love mixed with joy and with peace, I never felt peace before in my life. What is peace? Being here and now. This energy that came out of me was conscious. It was my conscience. It was in this energy. So I was that. How can I was that. You see? So that's me. Now. And then it blows up, and is this white scintillating light is everywhere, and my sense of self, my consciousness, is everywhere. And now a thought forms in my mind. Wow, this is the stuff of which everything is made. This is the stuff, this is the substance, this is the something, the indefinable something of which everything is made. And my body was hot, was vibrating, almost in, synchronous, but I don't know, with this scintillating of the light. There was some, the entire me was in this experience. And this experience changed me from this way to that way. 1 minute. 1 minute. Because this experience had the force within itself to find out about what it means. What it means. What does it mean? But it told me in that 1 minute, it told me the essence of what I'm going to tell you next, which is the work of another, 35 years, right? So 35 years to be able to explain, to give you whatever meaning, the meaning of that information. But that was not information. That was an experience. That was qualia experience. A qualia experience that actually told me that there is something that I must understand. Because it told me that I didn't understand the greatest part of what I experienced. So, do you think that a computer knows that it doesn't know? This is basically, I realized that I didn't know, I didn't understand what I experienced. So there was more to understand. So out of that experience came the force, the motivation, the energy to go find out. You see, so even the force comes from that stuff, which is what we are. And of course, every one of you can have the same experience. All you need is to ask. All you need is to want. All you need is to first take responsibility for your life. And then you can have it. So we all have the ability to know who we are, not reading books, but actually doing it through our own experience. So what this did to me, I started a process of trying to understand what consciousness is. So for 20 years, I worked on myself through all kinds of, meditations, psycho-spiritual, exercises, groups, and I went through all kinds of personal work for, using about 30 to 40% of my time. I was running 2 companies, in, one company then another in these 20 years. So it was a very demanding effort trying to understand and comprehend this experience. What does it mean? How can I connect this experience with what I know about physics? How can I join science and spirituality? How can they come together? They have to be together because I was the world observing myself with a point of view that was mine. But where does that point of view comes from? So that was the essence of the explanation that I can give you, but it's an explanation that is only a finger pointing to something that you have to find out yourself. I cannot explain to you. You have to find out the explanation, the meaning of the symbols. I'm speaking symbols now. The meaning of the symbols has to come from within, from your own essence. Wow. I was supposed to do this in 7 minutes. Okay. Yeah, but I cover a lot of material, I hope. So now, after those 20 years then, I decided, okay, I have, now I realize that consciousness, free will, must be fundamental aspects of reality. They are primitives. They cannot be explained with anything. You cannot explain this stuff with matter that doesn't have consciousness or has free will. Scientism says that there is no free will. Scientism says that consciousness is produced by the brain. It may be an emergent property. How can something that is more than the sum of the parts emerge from matter? I don't know, but that's what scientism say. An emergent property of the brain, or worse, an epiphenomenon of the brain, meaning that, yeah, it is a phenomenon, but really the real phenomenon is the working of the brain, and your consciousness doesn't mean anything because there is no free will. So what conscious can do, what cause can consciousness make if there is no free will? So, so consciousness is not worthy of study because it's an epiphenomenon. In physics we study phenomena, not epiphenomenon. Okay? So, a little bit of, macho man. So, now I don't have time to go through the details, but let me start. So, roll forward 15 years from there. So 20 years plus 15 or so we're here. And now I can explain, again, only explain with symbols, so you will need to do your own work to understand, because meaning comes before symbols. Meaning comes before symbols. According to science, scientism, but also according to today, with science with the capital S, information is only probability, related to probability. There is nothing has to do with meaning in the information of science. There is only symbols. There is nothing else. Qualia do not exist. Qualia do not exist. That's what scientism is saying. Qualia is an epiphenomenon of the working of the brain. So everything is in the brain. When the machine breaks, we are all gone. And, that's a pity, but, what the hell, you have to take it as it comes, right? If you have lemons, make a lemonade. and that's what I thought, but now I don't think that at all. Now I know that we are fields. Now, what is a field? Well, a field is a space. Is a space. What is a space? It's a field. That's the circularity of science, right? The circularity of science is, what is energy? What creates movement? And what is movement? What is created by energy? Okay, so now I can say we are fields that are created or emerged from one. One is the unified field. One is the unified field. And one has three properties. So I start with a postulate. I start with the postulate of being that says that one is dynamic, holistic, and wants to know itself. The first two properties of one are the properties of the universe described by quantum physics. Dynamic means it always changes, it's never the same instant after instant, and so on. Holistic is a little more tricky because only in the last 20 years we can say that the universe is holistic. Holistic means that it is not made of separable parts. Everything is interconnected within one. So one cannot be taken apart. That's why general relativity and quantum physics cannot be brought together because we have separated them. And we have separated them in a somewhat arbitrary fashion, and therefore we cannot put them back together. So we have to start with one which is holistic. It's not made of separable parts. Then the parts come out as a description that starts by including consciousness and free will in this one that I'm talking about. Because I added this third property of one. One wants to know itself. Why does one want to know itself? Well, because there is a certain level of fractality in reality. So you have to imagine that certain aspects of reality seems to be repeated at a different scale. Is a sort of holography. You know, we are parts whole of one, just like every cell of our body is a part whole of the entire organism, of the entire body. Why? Because the genome of the egg that created the entire organism is copied in every single part. Is copied in every single part. Now, is the computer made of parts whole? No, it's made of switches, on, off, on, off, on, off, that's it. But we are made of parts whole. Every cell contains the genome of the entire organism, exactly like every field contains the properties of one. Every field of the entire field. Every field contains the property of the complete field. And how do you explain then who we are? Well, because when one sees itself in the direction, in that particular direction in which it has known itself, it creates a field. It creates a field that, of course, it has to know itself completely in that direction because it's not made of parts, right? It has to, but that direction is like a you know, a set of a reference system that is what is our identity. Our identity is our capacity to see the totality with a particular reference system that is our own. And the reference system is when we are created as fields, and so it will never die because we are that field. Our consciousness is in that field, it's not in the body. You know, we have heard Chopra talk about that, you know, very well. But also, you know, if we try to explain with mathematics what consciousness is, we are barking off the wrong tree because consciousness is what creates mathematics, not vice versa. And consciousness is more fundamental, so we have to take it without, we cannot explain it, we can only feel it, we can only know it from within, and we can all do that. So when I say that we are conscious, but that one wants to know itself, and therefore this capacity to know itself is to, in all these filiations, all the fields that it creates, then these properties, you know, consciousness and free will, are basically properties that we all have. And we know that we have it, so is there a postulate that is more self-evident than this one? Think about it. If we want to explain the universe, is there a simpler postulate than this one? This is the simplest way, the simplest amount of, you know, of covenants that you have to have in order to explain the universe. And it's self-evident because we are all conscious and we all have free will. So, if we start there, then what can we do? We can explain why the first appearance of the world has to be quantum physics. Quantum physics has properties that baffle physicists since the day one. They don't understand why we have the collapse of the wave function. They don't understand why the quantum state of a field cannot be copied, cannot be reproduced. They cannot understand why, when you make a measurement of a quantum state, you can only get 1 bit per quantum bit of what you measure. Those are things that you have to take it for good. Well, just like Don Hoffman is saying, if you start with consciousness, now consciousness must explain something. If you start with consciousness and the fact that conscious experience has exactly the properties of non-duplicability, because everything that I feel within cannot be reproduced. And one more, that what can be known of what I feel is much smaller than what I feel. I know more than what I can say. Well, even the Tao says the same thing. The Tao said, you know, at least in the Italian translation translated back in English, it says, the Tao that can be told is not the eternal Tao. The same thing. It's saying that there is something deeper within us that can never be told, that these symbols cannot tell about that. And so this theory then says that quantum fields are conscious because consciousness has exactly the properties that quantum physics, or the fields that quantum physics cannot explain. And we can explain them. On top of that, then if the quantum field is conscious, then the collapse of the wave function is a decision of free will of the conscious field. So now I'm explaining what consciousness does. Don does not explain where he says there is a decision, there is, it explains it like a mathematical problem, but that doesn't explain. He is assuming, he's assuming those properties of the mathematics, because he said properly the consciousness has to be taken as fundamental. So, but you have to say a little more about consciousness does. And what I'm telling you is that consciousness allows you to experience, and the experience is not made of numbers. It's not made of numbers. Mathematics will never be able to explain an experience because the experience goes beyond numbers. But an experience, which is qualia experience, goes even further because experience, the essence of that experience is what I call meaning. And the meaning of the information, nobody talks about. Nobody talks about. Science, there is no meaning. It's all information. Now, for us, when I say information, I mean the meaning of a symbol. I don't care the symbol. If it doesn't have any meaning, it's not information for me. You see, science has started with the wrong foot in describing information. But notice the information is described with the concept of probability. And the concept of probability is a construct of consciousness. Who wants to know what happens in the future? Do you think that a computer is going to predict what is going to happen in the future? I mean, that he wants to know what, No. Probability is not a physical variable. It's a variable of the mind. So the mind, but the mind in the sense of conscious mind, because it's the conscious mind that wants to predict something in order to make decisions. It's the conscious mind kind of enters by the back door into the description of physics, and physicists call probability as if it was an objective variable, which is not. So in the matrices that Don Hoffman talks about, those numbers, where are those numbers coming from? They are probabilities. Those are probabilities. Where are they coming from? Who creates those numbers? How those numbers are coming out? You see? We are the ones that, through our free will decisions, create this reality, and this reality is open. We cannot predict what will happen in the future. This world is not deterministic. Only scientism is telling us that this world is probabilistic. So, I have given you a kind of a broad brush view of this theory that actually can explain many of the things that are, like out-of-body experiences, near death, and so on. This conceptual framework, can explain all kinds of things in a way that scientism cannot. Scientism has to deny the existence of what it cannot explain, which is what has been happening for the last 100 years. So, we all know that, right? So I have 5 more minutes, or if I'm generous with myself. And so let me tell you okay, great. What does it mean to me? What you told me, what is the consequence of what you're telling me? The consequences are major because it means that, for example, first of all, life doesn't start with living cells, like scientism is saying. Life starts with one creating parts whole of itself from the very beginning. One is reproducing itself at each time with a different point of view, with a different identity in order to know itself. So life is not the product of biology. Life goes deeper, is in the essence of one wanting to know itself, because one knows itself as many in the interactions of the many, creating a world that represents itself, because everything is within one. We are not separate from one. So then we need to know ourselves. How do we know ourselves? To know the other. We have to know each other in order to know ourselves, because we are parts all of one. So that means that we have to cooperate. We have to cooperate. Now, scientism says that the purpose of life is the survival of the fittest. Okay? So you better be fitter and kill the other guy so that you can survive. Because survival has to do with life or death. Remember, it's not a light word. It's a very charged word. That's why we have wars, because instead of cooperating, we compete. And the competition is enshrined in this simple, obvious reason for why life has to be that way. As the purpose of life is to survive. And if you ask, excuse me, what does it mean to be fitter? Well, the fitter is the one that survives. So life is the purpose of life, you got it, right? Is a circularity. Again, we explain fitness as the capacity to survive, and then we say that the purpose of life is to have the higher capacity to survive. I say life is about knowing ourselves by cooperating, and in order to understand this, you need to start by taking responsibility for your own life. And I wish you a wonderful life. Thank you.
Likewise. Who's got the mic? We need another mic, please.
We can share it.
You answer.
Hi, Federico. I'm an experimental physicist, and I've spoken to some other experimental physicists here who love your theory, and we're interested if you have any ideas or advice on how we can test your theory using physics.
Yes. Of course, as you know, the way to test any theory is to falsify the theories that do not predict what you predict. Or vice versa, if the experiment doesn't responds to one of the other theories, you are falsified, and so you are taken out of the table, which is appropriate. So the first set of experiments, which I have just started, is to show that plants are conscious. Okay, so if I show that plants are conscious, then I can falsify 80%, maybe even more, of the theories of consciousness that presume that consciousness is a product of the brain. Why? Because the plants don't have any brain. So how can they be conscious without a brain? Right? So that's the first series of experiments. And we will go step by step. It took 80 years to prove that entanglement exists. Okay, so this is even a bigger step forward. Entanglement is what allows to say that the universe is all interconnected in ways that you cannot know and in ways that keeps on changing as the interaction occur, so that is impossible to know. But for the next lecture.
Let me just say. Plants can be anesthetized and they have microtubules. We'll go right here.
It is likely that the way the conscious field communicates with the body, with the physical body, is via a microtubule. So What he's saying is not incompatible with what I say, but why are there microtubules, guys? Okay? Consciousness must come first. You have to start there. Otherwise, what is the point of... microtubules exist because consciousness comes first, okay?
Yes. Thank you very much for the wonderful talk. You mentioned that everything that we feel and doing is part of the consciousness.
Yes.
And we feel also that we've got will, of course, which is free will, part of the consciousness. And you mentioned about the purpose, that the consciousness wants to know itself.
Yeah.
I just want to add to this. There is not just want to know itself. We can see evolution in nature. So do you agree that nature, the consciousness wants to evolve himself? And that's why you can see this evolution, including what each animal want to create the next generation to evolve.
Yeah, basically, the evolution is not a phenomenon that derives from randomness, but it's actually the journey of all these conscious entities to know themselves. And so the more they know themselves, the more complicated is the symbols that we need to use to communicate with each other. The memory of our experience requires more space and matter and time, and on it goes. So you can explain those things, but there is no time to go deeper into it, but that's the essence. Yeah.
Thank you very much for the lovely talk. What you're talking about, and more broadly what the whole conference has been about, is going at a root of a very fundamental issue. For the last 500 years, at least in most of the world civilization, predominantly Western civilization, starting with Descartes, there has been sort of a very high conscious focus on reductionism.
Yep.
There was, about 500 years ago, there was a conscious separation in the intelligentsia between physics and metaphysics, chemistry and alchemy, and, astronomy and astrology, and the subjective and the objective were very consciously separated. And one could argue that because of that, in the age of materialism, humanity and civilization made tremendous progress at the material level, science and technology. One could also argue that there are many other civilizations that have walked this planet, maybe thousands of years ago, that had other systems of knowledge. And I think what you and the conference and what Stuart are all bringing together is this idea that we're really trying to bring all aspects of this human experience together, whether it's through the science, technology, materialism angle, or meditative and other traditions, in a way that can help redefine the future of the human race.
Yep.
And so I'd love to hear your vision for the roadmap forward.
Well, let's start with cooperation, okay? With taking responsibility and cooperation. I cannot give you the map of the future because, frankly, not even one knows. Because it's not written anywhere. There is no algorithm for the map of the future. We create the future together by living, acting properly or improperly. That's all.
I had one comment. I think we are all lost in the semantics while talking about science of consciousness. Mm-hmm. There are two worlds. One is the experiential world, and second is the observable physical world. The observable physical world is subsumed in the experiential world. Why? When there is observation, there is thought. When there is thought, there is an experience. We can never have an experienceless thought, but we can have a thoughtless experience. So having said that, for the past 400 years, the materialists have done a lot of good job in understanding the world, which is also real. In semantics, we are making it illusion, and we are not involving in right conversation. This is the comment, yes.
All right, thanks you. Thank you.
Okay, we really have to move on. I'm very sorry. There's a whole other event that's starting this afternoon, the Festival of Consciousness. We're going to hear about that in a few minutes. But first, a big round of applause for Federico Federico Faggin. Thank you very much. Okay. I want to thank all the registrants, all the speakers, poster presenters, the sponsors who you see up behind me, the volunteers, the AV people, DJ Hide Sagusa for the dance party, James Tagg for the poetry slam, the hotel who changed its name just for us apparently to confuse us, Javi Ginesta and his wonderful team, especially Diana, the city of Barcelona, Spain, Gaudi, who may be a saint we heard today, and who gave us the wonderful logo along with ChatGPT. Thank you very much, Javi, for that. My assistant, Abby Behar Bontefiore, who's been like the Wizard of Oz back in Tucson, pulling strings and keeping this thing going. Our Center for Consciousness Studies. The Science of Consciousness Conference will pick up again April 6th through 11th, 2026 in Tucson at Ventana Canyon. And the Festival of Consciousness starts this afternoon. And to introduce that, Javi Ginesta.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone. We've been withstanding here for 5 days. Let's just wait for 5 more minutes and we'll be done, okay? Well, I wanted to thank everyone. This is probably for me is the moment I've been dreaming on for the last 5 days. This has been like giving birth to a whale or something like that. I think I've broken the record of the number of times per second I've heard my name being called. So yeah, I was really looking forward to this moment. The problem is now another whale is coming up, which is the festival, which is starting in a couple of hours. And I wanted to give you a couple of instructions for those who are staying for the event. Before that, I just wanted to thank everyone. I think this event is evolving in a direction of openness, of connectedness. For me, these 5 days, or every time I come to this event, for me, kind of turns my world around. It kind of helps me turn my belief system around, and that's what we've been doing these days, opening up our minds to accept other perspectives of reality. One of the problems of humanity today is that we tend to look at the same problem, whether scientifically, spiritually, or however, we're looking at the same situation, life situation, from different angles, and one see that situation red, others see it green, and we argue. We're seeing the same thing, we're seeing different aspects of reality, and argue about what color is right. We don't realize all the colors are part of the same white light. So I hope that this event makes a contribution to opening up our minds to allow us to share this spirit of, sharing knowledge. If we put our knowledge together, we know more than each of us individually. So that's what we're trying to accomplish here. That's what's been going on these days. And now, after, such an intellectual effort for 5 days in a row, now comes the time to decompress and comes the time for fun. That's what's coming up next. The Festival of Consciousness is the continuation, is the big party that we had conceived for this event. The festival is going to begin at 3:30 formally, but they're opening up the doors for us specifically, so we can go now to the food truck area and have lunch together and do the opposite of what businesses do. Businesses call this speed networking. We're going to do a slow networking event by the food truck area. How about that? Okay, so So I'm not going to make it much longer. I just wanted to say big thanks to the hundreds of volunteers, speakers, and philanthropists in general. The first day I talked about philanthropy. For me, a philanthropist is not just someone with money that donates his money for a good cause. It's everyone that donates the best of himself or herself to a good cause, whether money, knowledge, or whatever, right? So there's been over 500 philanthropists making this event and the festival possible. So I'd like to ask for a final round of applause for everyone. And with that, we'll go to the party. Let the party begin.